Hello and welcome to Odessa. This is Dresden's Tale, episode 12. I've been looking forward to this one for a while. I consider this a benchmark chapter. Now, I'm not going to give you a bunch of spoilers ahead of time. I'm not going to tell you why. But I will say one thing. I've mentioned from time to time that these episodes, I consider that a fair rating is rated R, even though I think it'd generally be a PG-13. We do deal with mature events, mature subjects, and this is absolutely one of those episodes. So parents, if you're listening, make sure that you listen to this one ahead of time to make sure it's something that the kids are up to hearing about. That is, if you allow them to listen at all, and I certainly understand if you don't. We do have sexual themes from time to time and a fair amount of violence. Frankly, I think that the most controversial part of this for me is that sometimes the bad guys, which our heroes are the bad guys, they're doing stuff that they do not face repercussions for. So, without further ado, we're gonna dive into it. This is chapter 11. This is the 16th day of Rudy, 2051 years after the fall. Dresden's feet came down in a steady rhythm, sending little puffs of dust in his wake. He'd been at a jog for a full minute in pursuit of two small humanoids. His legs were stronger than his eyes, but presumably they were the children of humans squatting in a ruined village they had entered just a few minutes before. "Go, Dresden!" Pantites called from behind him. "Give 'em hell!" Drips of sweat trickled down his bald head. His eyebrows were already saturated. 2 days ago, Dresden thought he was in trouble again. Shortly after sending the letter to his grandfather, he'd been called to the Temple of the Lord's Lady. He figured it had to do with the brawl. Whether he was in the right or not, he'd known from the beginning he'd pay for his actions. Instead, Dresden was shocked when they told him he was going with a mixed team into the borderland. There were a dozen small abandoned villages, many of them now infested with vermin. He was the least accomplished warrior of the mission, but several of the veterans had taken him on as a project. A local warrior named Viarna spent a considerable amount of time giving the young dwarf advice. Eventually, Dresden began to think he was just an audience for the Minotaur's accomplishments, but he absorbed whatever he could. Kita, another Minotaur, this one lovely, seemed equally interested in him. On their first night, Dresden thought her attentions might have went further. Dresden, of course, had never seriously considered bedding anything with horns and cloven feet, but thought she might want to. Suddenly, he was conflicted. She was a stronger warrior. He wasn't sure if he'd even really have a choice once she decided. The fantasies started to run through his head. He wondered how hairy she might be below the belt line. What if they got started and he changed his mind? No, if I'm going to do this, I have to commit, he thought to himself. Dresden had nearly made up his mind when he realized that she'd left the fire. He spotted her wandering away from the light with Viarna. A few minutes later, he heard the jealous sounds of sex. Grunts, squeals, and the occasional bellow resonated through the camp. He wasn't even sure why they bothered to step away. Dresden decided it was for the better. What was he thinking anyway? And for the rest of the trip, he continued to glean what information he could from the veterans. The human children had started with a massive lead. But the end of the race was never a doubt in Dresden's mind, until a brief moment at the end. 10 minutes after leaving the village, he had a small concern when they entered more rugged terrain. If he lost line of sight, they might get away. Just 100 yards later, he came up on a small rise. The warrior spotted them. He first noticed how dirty they were. Their clothes were little more than shreds, and the boy's shoes were gone from his bleeding feet. Fucking heretic animals. Dresden strode forward. The girl started to run, but he sent her sprawling with a club across the legs. In his estimation, she was 15, and her brother was perhaps his own age of 17. Both had curly black, lice-infested hair and possessed the squished eyes of their people. The boy backed away from him and fell on his backside. "You're not even going to defend your sister? Fuck, child. No wonder your people were so easy to destroy." As Dresden stepped forward, the human clumsily tried to scamper away. "XII, Butu, XII." Dresden thought he saw tears starting to emerge from the boy's eyes. Dresden taunted, "SS Boohoo, Essie." Suddenly, the young heretic was on his feet and started to run. "Oh, fuck no, not again." He hurled the club into the boy's legs, causing him to fall. He walked over and picked up the weapon. In one smooth motion, he split the boy's forehead open. Screaming, the girl was up and ran to her brother. She held him. Dresden shook his head. "Why do you fucking care? He wasn't willing to do shit for you." Even at her young age, the girl was as tall as the dwarf, but Dresden was far stronger, and the run had barely winded him. "Time to go back home. If you're lucky, they'll let you live." He wrestled the boy's dead weight onto his shoulder and directed the girl back towards the village with a series of hard pushes and jabs. After a long, hot walk, they arrived to a round of clapping. Two of the children's male relatives were lying in the street. One had the side of his skull caved in, and the other was in the center of a pool of blood. "All that effort, and you bring one back alive," Kita said. The Jungo hated their southern neighbors long before the Kelds had arrived. They had been treated like mindless barbarians, often enslaved when they could be captured. From inside a half-collapsed shed, Dresden heard a woman's shrill cries for help. No one budged. Finally, the cries ceased, and Baril came walking out. He was naked from the waist down, except for a pair of boots and a knife strapped to his thigh. "How nice! Fane's got a pet." He realized he still had a hold of the girl's hair. He threw her down and pointed to her. "Stay. We're stringing him up, right?" Previous missions had posted signs telling any remaining locals to walk south and turn themselves in. Anyone not obeying would be killed. Gang spoke up. "She's young. She can still be converted." Kita laughed. "Is that your Tianism I've heard so much about? Send the garbage to schools until they learn? We didn't give our own people that chance. Fuck, I killed a brother because he wouldn't stop sacrificing goats. I'm a sand turd if you think this little frail bitch is worth saving." "We're just getting started here. 5 more villages in 4 days. I'm not keeping up with the little whore," Baril declared. "Let Dresden decide," Viarna called out, and everyone seemed to agree. For a moment, the dwarf considered sparing her life. It was an act that might earn favor with Gain. Though he was certainly an accomplished priest, that was not necessarily a good thing. He spent a moment thinking how the girl's life might have gone differently. It was 2 parts pity and 1 part regret, but lacking any compassion. "I just brought her back for hanging." As he walked toward her, she grabbed his leg as if understanding he held her life in his hands. It took effort to peel her away. The gathered warriors were laughing at the show. Finally, he got a bit of separation and caught her look in the eye just as he took her full in the ribs with his club. She fell to the ground in a heap. He finished her with a second blow to the head. As they rode for the next town, he truly hoped she'd find some happy new beginning in the next life. He fantasized that she entered the Citadel of Shades and accidentally found her way to the throne room of Mortis, servant of Oggs. There she would impress him with her will to serve and a strength of spirit that Dresden had missed in her. He pictured her reborn as a warrior, joining the Killed army, in an ironic twist, sending a whole new batch of heretics off to die. He knew that wouldn't be her fate, but he hoped. Heretics don't go to Oggs, not even the lucky ones. Mostly, he just thought about how hot it was, and wondering what journey his own soul had taken to get him into the roasting hell of Odessa. So that's it for Chapter 11, Episode 12. You can see, I think, what I was talking about earlier with mature themes. You can strike it up to Dresden just having his sense of duty for his religion, or maybe peer pressure. This is how he was raised. The heretics are at the same time an enemy and a lesser being to the Kelds. If you leave a dislike, that's fine. If you leave a like, that's even better. This is the kind of story that you have found yourself in, and I hope you enjoy it. We're going to have a lot of exciting adventures with Dresden and the Kelds Empire's interactions with heretic peoples. So, with that said, this is the part where I ask you to share my video, tell your friends about it. I know there's an audience out there for this kind of fantasy adventure. It's not a fairy tale. It is a very serious exploration of how humanity, intelligent beings, handle adversity. And we have a lot of ups and downs and emotional excitement as we go. If you could visit my Patreon and support me, that would be awesome. Anything that you can do to keep me going would be very much appreciated. To keep up with station updates and news, you can follow me at Lewis Nichols on Twitter. And if this kind of thing excites you, you can go to Amazon. My books are available for download to Kindle readers. I have other genres there, but my fiction does tend to be on the dark side. So with that said, thank you very much for all stopping by. That's all that's ever necessary. And I hope you all have an absolutely wonderful day.